Benchmark, the voice of business. Presented by LMD.
On this edition of Benchmark, Rukshan Widyalankara, Principal Director and Chairman of RWPL and the President of the Commonwealth Association of Architects joins us today to discuss the architecture industry in Sri Lanka. Then, market analyst and LMD columnist Hasta Premratna assesses market sentiment. And finally, Mihirani Disanayaka, TNS Lanka's country manager, discusses TNS's latest nationwide survey. That's the lineup for Benchmark.
Hello and welcome to Benchmark. I'm Savitri Rodrigo. Today we're going to discuss the architecture industry in Sri Lanka, and with us in our studios is Rukshan Widyalankara, who is the Principal Director and Chairman of RWPL. He's also the President of the Commonwealth Association of Architects and the past President of the Sri Lanka Institute of Architects. Rukshan, good to have you on our show once again.
Thank you, Savitri. Thank you for inviting me.
What is the prevailing architectural landscape like in Sri Lanka at this point?
Well, if you ask me that question, I have mixed feelings. On one side, we have some very good architects who have been producing very good architectural products in various parts of Sri Lanka. It's beautiful to see them, and they can be rated anywhere in the world at a very high levels. But having said that, then there are the other side, which we see the large scale average buildings we see in our urban cities as well as in our villages, which are very mediocre in nature, most of which have not been built by architects. They have been built by others who have had no previous organized education in architecture. So those are the large component. Maybe about 90% or 95% of the buildings are done in that manner.
Shouldn't there be a standardization process? Shouldn't there be an architect always involved in a building project?
You're very right. I mean, there should be always an architect involved in building process, not only at the end, but from the beginning. But because architect's role starts at the very early stage, even before sometimes the building is conceived by the developer or the owner, and goes, and it doesn't end at the, once the building is constructed and finished and handed over. It goes beyond that. So that entire period of time, a proper involvement of an architect, a qualified architect, should be there. So there are regulations, there are standards, as you would say, and there are various means by which these things have been brought into our structures. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be happening, particularly in the outside the cities, in the hinterland and so on. This doesn't seem to be happening. To some extent, I also blame our system as well as even the architects, because most of them are concentrated in Colombo and the main cities. So to get architectural service in a rural area is quite difficult. So that may be one of the reasons. To that, I think the Sri Lanka Institute of Architects has taken few steps, and they are taking this profession to the regions.
Now, very recently, Kandy was named as going to be the first smart city in Sri Lanka. Lots of discussion and rhetoric has been produced about smart cities and also about the megapolis. Now, how is this going to impact the architectural profession as well as construction projects in general?
Well, these are 2-3 different things we are talking about. Now, the question about these megapolis actually came about during the previous UNP government, and the Western Province megastructure plan, so to speak. That was not very popular at that time. Now, then it went through a certain upheaval, changes, but it never took place. The subsequent government didn't want to do that. Now, the present megapolis concept that we hear bits and pieces of it. It has not been still structured in a particular way. It is a city that is being spoken of about 8.5 million people, and stretching from Beruwala going all the way up to Nigambo, covering the entire western province or even little more. Now that is it's a huge plan. Now the whole world now is talking about deurbanization. So that is not to make such large cities, but to make smaller cities if possible, because that is better in terms of healthcare, education, and so on. But we are talking about bringing people into one area and making it large, the city becoming large, which I of course don't seem to understand what the rationale behind it. But there are so many issues that has to be taken into consideration. But I was listening to the Honorable Minister recently, Megapolis, Champika Ranawaka. I was happy to listen to him. I think he was very clear. He's learning a lot on this. I think he has studied. He was mentioning that this won't work if we just copy some other country. We have to develop a homebred, our own megapolis plan. If we were to have a megapolis, it might end up not being a megapolis at the end, but it will be a planned city. I think what we could do now is do the very first few things initially, and over a period of time let it evolve into a better developed program.
But Rukshan, on the other side, look at the port city, for instance. It's a mega project now in abeyance. What about the importance of environmental impact assessments? How are we going to manage water, sewage, garbage disposal, waste management? How is all that going to happen, even if we do get the people in?
I think the port city is a very small part in this whole plan that is being spoken of. But although it's small, when I say small, the megapolis itself is a huge program. But the port city itself is it's a large area that's being reclaimed, and so much of people are going to be residing in it. So as you said, there has to be water, there is waste that has to be taken care of, and so on. I was surprised to hear that there was no environmental impact assessment done before the project started. Actually, this should have been done before that. There's a process, there's a law in this country with regard to the EIA, environmental impact assessment. Now that process actually for a building project of a much smaller scale takes at least 6 months to 1 year.
And it is fairly stringent, right?
It is very, very stringent. So, now if you take the entire, the central province in the hilly areas because of the landslides, any project other than maybe houses has to go through the EIA or IER, initial environmental examination report. They don't approve anything other than that. Even if you want to build a 10-room small hotel or whatever, you have to get the IER. Now here we are talking about so many hectares are being reclaimed and done, and the fact that it has not been done before, I was surprised to hear, because that is not the way it should have happened. So when the EIA is done, that will show how to mitigate these effects of waste, pollution, water, all those things. So that has to be pre-planned, and according to our law, it has to be made public, and people has to be comment on it, and so much of things will have to happen. Now, so far, still we have not heard of that.
Rukshan, we're going to go in for a short commercial break. And on the other side, we have Rukshan Widyalankara. He's going to discuss what are the key challenges that are emerging for the architecture industry, and also how do we perceive Sri Lanka's current crop of talent in architecture. Stay with us.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
We can show you a world, shining, shimmering, splendid, amazing, beautiful, dazzling, wondrous space for you and me. A whole new world, the future's got a whole new world for you.
The most advanced technology now on multiple smart devices for total convenience. Welcome to H&B New World Banking.
Thank you for staying with Benchmark. We are continuing our discussion with Rukshan Widyalankara, Principal Director and Chairman of RWPL. Rukshan, if you look at the architecture industry right now, besides rising construction costs, which are quite prohibitive, what are the key challenges facing you?
Well, any architects has three different parties to satisfy. You have the owner, and the developer in any project. I'm not talking about house, I'm talking about anything other than a house. Then you have the operator, then you have the general public. Now these are three different sets of people who will have to be satisfied by the architect. Now owner and the developer will be interested in the brand value of the building. Where will that building sort of emerge when it comes into the market? The operator, on the other hand, will want to know how much he could maximize his profits, because that is his target. Then the public, the general public, who will want to know everything else, a nice building, something very easy to enter, the accessibility, the pollution-less structures, and so on. Now, as an architect, you got to satisfy all these three. So it's how you carefully manage to settle all these issues with these sets of people. Now, in this present context, the challenges are many, because as I told you, only about 5 to 10% of the buildings are designed by architects. So all the other buildings are not designed by architects, but the issues of those buildings come into the architect's account. That has been the case for the last so many years. So the challenges, I would say, is to see how we could maximize the number of the architectural input into buildings, so that we could, if there's a law to say that all buildings will have to be designed by an architect, which is the case now, and if we can make that law operative, I think that is the fantastic thing we could do, because that will change a lot of the issues we are having now. Secondly, we have this issue of public or our developer wanting us to do buildings in the same manner as that is done maybe in some other country. I think if there is some way, so our target is to educate people and so on, and say, look, that is not the case. You do a building that will suit the site, the city, and so on, and the place where it is built. That will change the cityscape, the streetscapes, and so on. The streets are going to look nicer. The people are going to be happier. Tourists will like our cities more. That should be the target. That should be one of the challenges an architect will have to face.
Rukshan, how practical and cost effective are green buildings for a growing city?
See, Sri Lanka is a good example for these green buildings. Green buildings are the way of design for architects in Sri Lanka, because all our buildings which we design in the Sri Lankan way were all green buildings. You don't have to have a label put in there saying this is a LEED certified building or a green building. Most of our buildings are green buildings. For that matter, if you look at, if you even try to give a rating for that, all these buildings will come up with a very high rating. But now the green building has become a fashion. because of many things. Because one thing, it has been developed in the West. There's a rating that has come in for whatever the reason, and the rating is such that you got to do some ungreen things to make it green. For instance, now there are some of the ratings that we have now. You got to air condition the building to get more marks, whereas the building could run. In most of our buildings, they are not air conditioned. We have what is called a natural ventilation. We induce cross ventilation. Cross ventilation won't give that marks to you. If you air condition with the proper type of air conditioning, then you will get that mark. So you can imagine what a futile exercise is for Sri Lanka to get these green labels. But it has been a fashion, particularly for some of these companies who are exporting products to the US and the West and so on, because they don't look at these things. They will want to know only whether the facility is green or whether the facility has been certified by whatever the company. So that is how this green has become a fashion all of a sudden. I think most of our buildings will rate very high if they are rated
in the proper green sense.
In the sense of the carbon footprint.
If you look at our current crop of young talent, how do you rate them? How do you see them, and do they match up to global standards?
Yes, very much. I think we have architects who are long starved of opportunities in their in their own way, and we have very high standard system of education here in Sri Lanka. I think a lot of these Asian region like to see architects from Sri Lanka going and working in those countries. That has been the trend, particularly India and most of Pakistan and so on. There are lots of architects from Sri Lanka they would like to employ, because we use green buildings, we do indigenous designs. There are no architects who are confined to a certain standard or certain type of architecture, certain style. We have a very wide variety when it comes to architecture. Now we have a few schools here. We have two main schools of architecture. They are very high standards. Most of them got the accreditation from various organizations, from the Commonwealth Association of Architects as well as from the Royal Institute of British Architects. So they do come here to ascertain whether their standards are maintained in some regular manner. The standard is very high. And as a result, a lot of them have gone abroad to further their studies, and unfortunately most of them have not returned. But I think we have no qualms about our capability of our architects who are coming out of the universities as well as those who have been practicing here.
Thank you, Rukshan. It's been very interesting talking with you.
Thank you very much.
We've been discussing the trials, the tribulations, the challenges, trends, and even the opportunities that are coming up for the architecture industry here in Sri Lanka with Rukshan Widyalankara, who is the Principal Director and Chairman of RWPL and also the President of the Commonwealth Association of Architects. On the other side, we have Anishan Selvaraja with more.
Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC. Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC.
We can show you a world, shining, shimmering, splendid, amazing, beautiful, dazzling, wondrous place for you and me. A whole new world.
The most advanced technology now on multiple smart devices for total convenience. Welcome to H&B New World Banking.
Hello and welcome back to Benchmark. I'm Anushan Selvaraja. Now for a closer look at the latest on the bourse, and joining us is market analyst and LMB columnist Hasita Premratna. Welcome back, Hasita. Now to start off with, how has the stock market reacted to the election results?
So I think there was a lot of expectations before the election that there will be stability after election and there will be more investor confidence that will come up post elections. But I think there we had mixed results. On one side there was some level of stability that came in. Obviously a 47 member government became a 106 member government, so that kind of was a initial good starting point. But then having said that, that had not really taken us too far because there have been more ambiguity and questions around the theme of good governance, which this government came into power, especially when some of the appointments were made into the ministers. At first place there's yet again a jumbo cabinet together with plenty of deputy ministers, state ministers, etc. And then add to that is the list of names that came in. So this raised a few concerns and questions among the investor community, whether the word good governance is just a word or whether it will be actually practiced by the new regime. So that's one of the concerns. So that definitely had an impact on the market behavior, because we saw pre-election, soon after election, we saw the index touching about 7,500 levels, but subsequently the index dropped to about 7,100, and right now it's hovering around those levels. So the drop in the index is pretty much driven by multiple factors, not really the local political situation, but also the global volatility, the rupee depreciation, etc. But definitely the type of certainty and type of confidence that investors were looking for after the elections did not really materialize post-election in the immediate debates that have taken place. So hopefully the government will pull up their socks and try to get things back in order and stick to their word and deliver the promises that they came out prior to the elections.
Now, Hasita, our currency has depreciated by 4 to 5% over the past 2 weeks. Now, how is this going to affect our economy and the market?
Yeah, I think there are two aspects to this rupee depreciation. On one side, we saw clearly the global markets getting impacted because China decided to depreciate their currency by almost 3%. So when Chinese currency yuan depreciated 3%, some of the other regional currencies like in India, it almost went about 6.5%. Indonesia and many other regional currencies started to show a similar trend of depreciation. So in that backdrop, obviously Sri Lanka was holding on for about a week or two, but certainly it was something that could not be held for too long. It had to be adjusted. So fundamentally speaking, I think that was something that was due. So pegging the currency to a 133-34 level was not possible, and it had to be kind of free floated. With that, we saw the currency touching almost 140 levels and even briefly 141 levels. So with that adjustment on one side, the local economy also has been quite volatile and have been under pressure because our balance of payments and the trade deficits have been widening. On one side, we have seen the balance of payments, the trade deficit widening primarily because we have had excess imports, mainly in a low interest environment. People borrow and buy vehicles and import various other products. So there was a huge boom in the consumption in the country, but that was predominantly driven by local debt, cheap debt, and that had an impact on import cost. So trade deficit widened, and also we saw political uncertainty kind of holding on to some of the FDIs and for other foreign inflows, which in turn had an impact towards the balance of payments. So central bank had to defend the rupee. They spent a lot of money out of the reserves, foreign reserves, and in fact it came to a point where there was no position to kind of hold on any further. So in that context, when you look at it, it's good from a local economy perspective that there was some depreciation. Global depreciation was also connected to it. But having said that, from a impact point of view, there will be definitely exporters in the short run who will benefit, and the exporters will benefit, and the importers who will have a issue out of it because their cost will go up. But when you take the holistic view, I think considering that we are a more import driven economy, we are more we have a bunch of foreign debt to be repaid annually, this is also going to have an impact on our budget deficit. So it is important that the government look at the rupee depreciation and look at maybe not influencing per se, but at least looking at the possibility of encouraging inflows into the country in different forms to ensure that the rupee depreciation is controlled at these levels. If that happens, I think economy can weather this. So as the companies listed in the market, which in turn will obviously have some impacts between importers, exporters, and guys who are geared a bit because if the interest rates go up slightly. But broadly, I think this level is bearable. If it goes beyond these levels of 140 plus, then we will have a challenge.
What is your overall view of the Colombo Stock Exchange?
Well, I think the volatility will continue. There is no question about it because investors are still in two minds. All these three factors, if you look at, they have a direct impact towards the economy and the listed companies' profitability. So naturally, investor behavior will be influenced by these factors, and these three factors still look uncertain than certain. So this certainty of these three factors will play a key role in the market behavior. So as long as these three factors remain volatile, which we can see in the at least in the near future, there will be definite volatility in these areas of political framework as well as in the global markets as well as in the currency. So considering all these factors, the volatility is expected to continue, and volatility means there will be opportunities as well to enter at the right price, because the longer term fundamentals of the Sri Lankan economy has not changed, which means that the longer term direction should be on a positive note. So short term volatility might offer trading opportunities to pick up fundamentally sound counters at reasonable price levels.
Thank you very much for joining us, Hasita.
Thank you.
That was market analyst and LMD columnist Hasita Premaratna. After a short commercial break, we will be back with the latest on the LMB TNS survey. Stay tuned.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
We can show you a world, shining, shimmering, splendid, amazing, beautiful, dazzling, wondrous space for you and me. A whole new world, the future's got a whole new world for you.
The most advanced technology now on multiple smart devices for total convenience. Welcome to H&B New World Banking.
Hello and welcome back to Benchmark. I'm Anushan Selvaraja. Now for a closer look at the latest on the LMB TNS survey, with me is Country Manager Mihirani Disanayaga. So welcome Mihirani. Just give us a brief overview of the last survey.
Right. This month's survey was all about foreign investors and the people of this country. How do they see the importance of foreign investors to the country, and a little bit about how country is doing on attracting best quality investors to the country is all about the study this month.
How important are offshore investors for Sri Lanka?
It's really interesting to see majority we interviewed seen the importance of foreign investors to the country. Majority, like 95%, believe that foreign investors are must for this country in order to have a stable economic condition as well as development. And foreign investments will bring more jobs for people in this country. All in all, overall country development. All in all, people believe that it's very important for this country having quality foreign investments.
So Mihirani, has enough been done to attract FDI according to the survey results?
Yes, Anushan, 7 out of 10 people who we interviewed believe that the country has done enough to attract the quality foreign investors. The reason being they have seen the government has invested to buy companies which are very profitable, also to help foreign investors to start business in Sri Lanka.
Let's take corruption now. Do respondents feel that corruption is affecting our investment prospects?
Yes, respondents feel the corruption in this country. It is the situation still, and it is probably obvious that corruption will discourage foreign investments to this country.
So what more needs to be done for Sri Lanka to attract better foreign investment?
Right. People of this country is very clear a few things that the country has to do to improve foreign investors and attract foreign investors to this country. One is political stability. The country has to demonstrate political stability to the rest of the world, and infrastructure. We should continue to develop our infrastructure of the country. And interesting point about appointing educated people to control the country are 3 interesting things that people of this country has suggested this country to bring quality foreign investors.
Thank you for joining us, Mihirani. That was the country manager of TNS Lanka, Mihirani Dissanayake. Thank you for watching Benchmark, and we hope to see you again next time.